Tune in with Power Psychology and find your joy again on the Health and Wellness Channel on TVU with today's guest, Clare Acheson, a registered provisional psychologist with Power and Psychology and Associates. How are you today, Clare?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Thank you for finding some time with us. You're very busy, and it's good. I like it. Now, I haven't seen this before. Registered provisional psychologist. What does that title mean?
Yeah, so a registered provisional psychologist is someone who has finished all the education to become a psychologist, and they've had their credentials reviewed and approved by the College of Alberta Psychologists in Alberta. And so that's the point in the registration process that I'm at. And so as you work your way through, finish your education, that's kind of like the last step before you come fully registered as a psychologist.
Okay. So what was your education path to get here?
Okay, so I had a very interesting education path actually to get here. So when I finished high school, I kind of followed what my parents expected me to do. I think like a lot of us do. When you're in your adolescence, there's a lot going on, and your ability to like conceive of your future in a very concrete way just doesn't happen. When you are 12 years old, you start growing a part of your brain that finishes growing when you're about 23 or 25. It's called your prefrontal cortex. That is the part of your brain that can do like long-term like goal setting and things like that. So as an adolescent or in early adulthood, you don't really have the brain capacity to really know where you're going. So my parents were, I think I was interested in being a doctor as a kid. So they were like, that's awesome. You go for that. So I went to university. I started off at Grant MacEwan. I did 2 years at Grant MacEwan doing a Bachelor of Science in biological sciences. And it was awesome except for one course, which is a course called Comparative Anatomy of Vertebrates. And yeah, so that actually really informed the work that I do now, because that course, Comparative Anatomy of Vertebrates, spells out vertebrate evolution with a lot of like corroborating evidence along the way. And you're like, oh, okay, this looks like this happened like pretty concretely, or at least that was my experience of it. So now as a therapist, when I look at our reactions to things, our emotions, how we experience things, what our internal dialogue is, I very much hold all of the learning that happened in our entire evolutionary history and how that informs our behavior today. What are you going to do with your life? And at that point, I like totally melted down. I had a freak out. I called my mom. I was at school. I was like, what am I going to do with my life? She's like, well, I can't help you from work. So why don't you go to your school counselor, right? Like, I'm sure they have someone at Grant MacEwan you can go see. And I went in there and I was just like melting down. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I have no idea, right? I was also then at that point, like coming into like early adulthood more. I had more of my prefrontal cortex. I'd started to see like, what am I into? What am I not into? Taking some like elective or like, you have to take what are they called? There's like core requirements for your like if you get a degree. And so I'd taken some courses in psychology and anthropology and loved them. So I was like, all right, well, this is where my interest lies. I do well in these courses, you know, because I find the content so interesting. And so then I applied to the University of Alberta, and I got into a Bachelor of Arts program and did a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Anthropology. And so that's kind of then the knowledge set that I got there, which was awesome. Anthropology, a huge fan of. I don't know if you know much about anthropology. Do you?
Well, just that to me it comes across as a combination of history and biology and culture mixed together. So
It's a
yeah.
lot of content. It's a lot. I think it's the study of humankind or something like that. I'm like, that's very broad. And so, but in taking anthropology, I learned about, I think I took a course called Anthropology of Gender. When I first started that course, I was like, it's guys and girls. What more is this, you know? Because I didn't know. I hadn't been raised with that knowledge. I'm in my mid-30s. So I hadn't had enough exposure or awareness. And so when I took that course, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, like I had no clue about the ways that we, just like the spectrums that exist as opposed to the dichotomies. And just the way that I had been raised and encultured to believe things a certain way on, you know, on purpose because of history and because of a whole bunch of different other things, you know. And but that what I learned was wrong. And so anthropology did a lot of what you learned was wrong, you know, what you have a Western bias and it's not always right, and you got to know that you're having it and you got to check it. I learned about my privilege. I took a class called I think Anthropology of Human Growth Cycles or Growth Patterns, and the whole point of that class was like racism is what causes the disparities in health in the world, you know, or prejudice or things like that. And so it was very I was shocked that was knowledge that wasn't common. I was kind of shocked that was knowledge that I was being exposed to in a kind of niche way, because if I didn't go and take anthropology courses, like I didn't get exposed to that knowledge in school. I didn't get exposed to that knowledge in my community or from my family, you know, I didn't have that. There wasn't like an awareness of like having white privilege. We just kind of did our lives, you know, or any kind of privilege, you know? So, learning about all that was transformative, I'd say. So I also like gathered a ton from the anthropology courses that I took. And then that kind of set me up to really have a great experience learning about psychology, because I had kind of already had some biology background, some knowledge about culture and things like that. It kind of came together, and then I learned about our brain and our behavior and how that all plays out and what's going on there and the things that impact that and how we cope, why we respond the way we do. It all kind of makes sense whenever it all comes together. So so I finished my undergrad, and then I was looking for graduate school. So these are some things I wish I knew. It is important to know kind of where you're going, like where your endpoint is. I was kind of like, I decided I wanted to become a psychologist, and I was like, okay, so you got to go to graduate school. That's what I thought I had to do, right? And I thought I had to get my master's. Now, what I wish I knew I could have done was I could have got a PhD in about the same amount of time, with maybe a little bit more work, and maybe that's unfair to say. Maybe that's unfair to say to people who have their PhDs, because I don't have one. But my master's, it was a 3-year program. It took me 4 years because it took me an extra year to finish my paper at the end, which is basically your last year is like your practicum in your paper. So that took me 4 years. I think a PhD program a PsyD program to get like your doctorate in psychology is about a 5-year program. So I'm like, okay, well, one more year and like more of a research component to the paper that I did. I was like, I could add and there's a lot more mobility once you have your PsyD or your PhD. So I have my master's. Having my master's in Alberta allows me to become a psychologist in Alberta. It does not allow me to become a psychologist in BC or Quebec or a ton of other places. In fact, most of Canada and basically the rest of the world for the most part. So if you have your PhD or your PsyD, though, you can, if you meet the registration requirements, become a psychologist in basically everywhere. So if I had known that, and I had no one who had walked that path ahead of me who was guiding me. So it was all like on the fly kind of learning that stuff for myself. So if someone else can learn from this, rock and roll, right? So, so I looked for master's programs in psychology that I could take living here in Edmonton. I didn't want to travel for my education, but I did want a program that was in person. So in Alberta, there are a few programs that you can take that are online that are pretty awesome. I think Yorkville and Athabasca U, I think, have programs. But I went to a program that I could go in person to. Pardon me. So I went to City University of Alberta, which is kind of frame it like if like NAIT had a campus, like North American, like Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, if they had a campus in like PEI, let's say, be like NAIT PEI campus, right? City U is a college that originated in the States. Now, this is a very long story. Would you like me to tell it?
Sure.
This is, okay. This is why you have to go to almost always, or rather, there's more opportunity to go to a private school for psychology for your post, for like your master's kind of like a graduate level and beyond, then there are schools that like universities who offer this program. So for instance, the University of Alberta has a education, like a, okay, hang on. All right, can I take a moment here?
Sure.
This is a bit of a, this can really go down a path here, okay? So
well, if you want, or if you want to go now over towards your, what you're doing counseling wise, it's up to you. I'm interested in both.
Can I tell you both and you just like cut, and are you going to edit this afterwards? I hope so. Or am I messing this up right now?
No. I'll look at it. I like the content so far.
Okay, excellent. So,
I'm going to have some water too.
Yeah. Okay, so
you're going to go City University and private.
One sec, I just want to check one thing real quick, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right. So, I went to a school called City University of Seattle. You can also go to, I think the University of Calgary has a program, the University of Alberta has a program in education psychology. This is the thing about psychology, though, which is kind of interesting, is that psychologists kind of get, whenever we're fully registered, we're known what is called a scientist practitioner. So I can do both research and practice with that designation, which is pretty cool. But part of the reason that has a bit of a like dichotomy there is because there was like a fracture in like psychology, in the culture of psychology, in the field of it. In that, in the early days of psychology, psychologists really weren't doing very good. They were doing pretty terrible things. They did actually a lot of really, really terrible mess of things. There were even like some guys who went around like giving people lobotomies as like a treatment for like PMS or like depression, like in like the early days, like 1900s we're talking about, okay? So psychologists kind of got to start off like pretty dicey here, you know? So then what happened is psychology starts to become a science. They start to do research in psychology and learning more about it. But what they found was that people practicing applied psychology, which is the switch. We've got research psychology and we've got applied psychology. Applied psychologists weren't really reading the research. They weren't really doing what they were supposed to be doing. They, you're supposed to read the research, apply the research to help people, right? But early day psychologists were like, I learned how to do the Rorschach ink blot test. So whatever's going on with you, I'm going to give you that test. Whatever that test is, that's the treatment you get. So regardless of what treatment might be most appropriate or research-based, they just kind of did whatever they want. And research-based psychologists were like, I don't think so. Like, what you're doing is not science. What you're doing is unethical, and we're not into it. We're not okay with this. And so what happened is all these schools shut down their applied psychology division. Their research psychologists were like, no, applied psychology, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They kind of were like, ousted them. So like Berkeley closed their applied psychology division, the U of A closed their applied psychology division. Like a ton of universities did this as kind of like until you guys step up and do what you're supposed to be doing, we're rejecting you, Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately that has persisted to today. And so there are very few applied psychology programs at universities that you can go to. And the ones that do exist, they're super competitive because there's so few of them. And so because of that, you are more likely to be able to access a private program to learn applied psychology, which is the long, long explanation for why I went to a school called City University of Seattle in Edmonton.
Okay.
Yeah, so went to school in Edmonton. The teachers were psychologists who work in Edmonton, which is really cool. So they were able to be like, this is our community. This is the kind of work that we do, you know. This is what we're seeing. This is the kind of, pathways we're taking with clients. These are the resources that we have access to. So that was, this is our legislation, all of that, but, you'd get that anyways. But yeah, so I did my master's program at City University of Seattle. While I was there, I did a practicum at the Pride Center of Edmonton and a practicum at Jewish Family Services of Edmonton. Both of those places are awesome. They're great places. They're great places to, I think the counseling program at the Pride Center has been kind of taken on by the Family Center in Edmonton. I may be wrong about that, but last time I was informed about it, that was part of something that I believe was going on. So yeah, so both those places offer accessible counseling. So if the cost of counseling is a barrier to accessing counseling, Jewish Family Services is awesome. They offer a sliding scale. You don't have to be Jewish to go there. It's kind of like Catholic Family Services or anything like that, where they just the board of directors or the people who organize together, they may have been Jewish, but like the organization is anyone can access that place, which is really great. So I volunteered at those, I did my practicum at those places. Where does that take me? Oh, I also volunteered on a crisis line for victims of human trafficking called the Chrysalis Anti-Human Trafficking Crisis Line. And that one was those were some very impactful, I would say, experiences that I had counseling on the line. But they're doing some incredible work on that line. They, whenever I was working on it, we would have a regular 6-hour shift every week so that we could have clients who had called us previous weeks call us back on our shift so that they could continue doing work to maybe process or work through or stabilize, but continue on so they don't have to retell any of their trauma story if that's not therapeutic for them, So
right, yeah.
So I thought and that was great. That line is manned completely by volunteers. No one gets paid there. No one. There is, I think, it costs $10,000 to run that line for the year, and that's I think insurance and the cost to have someone whatever the phone receiving the phone that people call in the way that it gets distributed out, So yeah, that one was really cool. But I did learn a lot about human trafficking, which most people don't know is a major problem in North America. Most people don't know that. Most people think that's a European problem or a Southeast Asian problem, but it's a major Canadian problem, and it's a major world problem. They think that industry is worth more than the illicit drug industry, human trafficking. That blew my mind when I learned that. I was I think it was when I worked on that line, it was a $52 billion. They estimated $52 billion industry annually, selling other people's bodies. I know. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, it's terrible. So, yeah, that was. I think that was that working on that line. I developed what I think most therapists develop at some point is a bit of a force field, which is a bit of a boundary between what is said and what hits me. So it's not that I don't receive it. I do receive it. It's just that, and it maybe sounds terrible. It's that didn't happen to me, right? I am supporting someone with whom this happened to, but there's a space between myself and that thing. And I find visualizations like that really, really helpful. So
That's good.
Yeah.
And then you came to Power?
Then I think so. Hang on, where are we at?
Crisis line.
Crisis line. Yeah. So I finished. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And then then you start to get registered. So I applied. I submitted my credentials to the College of Alberta Psychologist. They approved my credentials, and then then you go on a mission to find a supervisor. I found a supervisor. My supervisor's name is Sharon Meredith. She's awesome. And so as a provisional psychologist, you have to do 1,600 supervised hours of practice, which means I have 1,600 hours that I am face-to-face with another client. So if I have and it includes my note writing time as well. But so if I see a client face-to-face for 50 minutes, that's, for a therapeutic hour, you do 50 minutes in person and then 10 minutes to do my notes, right? Or 5 minutes to write my notes at the end, 5 minutes to review them at the start so that we have good continuity of care, right? So, but usually it just gets stacked to the end and I just yeah, so, sorry, I lost myself here.
Just the amount of hours working with Sharon.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. That's you're in it. You're in it right now, so you're obviously
Yeah. Okay. So so you have to do 1,500 or 1,600 supervised hours. So so you have your in-person hours that you're with a client. You do 1,600 of those. Then you have 107 hours that you have to do of supervision, which is then I meet with a supervisor to talk to them about basically things that came up in session and direction. Things like, I've been going down this direction. I could have gone down this direction. I'm kind of thinking, what might be appropriate here. Or sometimes I've encountered different situations where I might have to do write a letter for a lawyer and I need some advice or guidance on how to do that. Or I encounter a concern that I haven't worked on before or supported someone through before. So that's whenever you check in and you go, and that's what those conversations are like. So whenever we talk about supervision, we don't always mean that we have a supervisor in the room with us.
Right.
We have a conversation with them and we get consent for that. And whenever we have those conversations, no identifying information is revealed. So it's something along the lines of I have a client, this is what we're working on. This is the dynamic. This is what's going on,
Nice.
This is what we've been doing. This is what seems to be working. This isn't really working. Could I be doing this a different way? Am I getting this wrong? What do I, am I missing something here? And then you get the feedback of someone who has way more experience than you. And it's awesome. It's so good. So that's where I'm at. While you're, and I just finished my 1,600 hours, which is pretty great.
Nice.
Yeah. And then and then you have to do 2 exams.
Okay.
So there is an ethics exam and there is there's an exam called the EPPP, which I think is the examination of professional psychological practice. And everyone in, I believe, North America takes that exam in order to get as part of the registration process. So I've taken my ethics exam. My last step that I have to do now is take my EPPP, and then I'd be fully registered as a psychologist.
Okay. So
that is the arc. So you're a provisional psychologist between the time that you submit your credentials and have them approved, get your supervisor, get a job, pay for your insurance, and submit all that stuff. Once you do that, then they're like, here you go, you're provisional. Then you do the 2 exams and the 1,600 hours plus the supervision, and then then it's done.
Then it's done, and there you are, and just quickly because we're nearing running out of time. But so you're practicing with Power Psychology and Associates.
Yes, I am.
And you're the kind of clients that you're taking on, and what kind of area of practice are you doing?
Yeah, so in psychology, you're encouraged or kind of required to work within your competency. And so whenever I worked at the Pride Center of Edmonton, I developed competency working with clients who are transgender. And so I kind of keep part of my schedule open to take on clients who are transgender or navigating gender or exploring the gender, or in any way, if that's part of their experience, I'm a therapist who's trained and capable to support them. But I also work a lot with adolescents. They're one of my favorite client groups because, man, you between 12 and 30, you get an entire huge amount of brain growth. You get brain growth your entire life. You get new neurons your entire life. You can change your brain at any point if you want to.
Nice.
But in adolescence, you've got this huge opportunity, and it's just awesome. But adolescence is also so terrible because of how your brain works, because of like the areas of your brain that you have access to, and the way that they work. Like, adolescence sucks from the experience of like how your brain works. If and like the way you experience your emotions are so intense, and they're very often you haven't maybe learned like the skills to regulate your emotions yet, and it can be a lot. So
that's good. So how do I'm a parent, I've got 12 or 13-year-olds, or I'm a 24-year-old, and I want to directly contact you. How do we get a hold of you? 13-year-olds, or I'm a 24-year-old, and I want to directly contact you. How do we get a hold of you?
Okay, yeah. So you can get a hold of me at the Our Power Psychology website, where many psychologists post their profiles. And you can just look me up, Clare Acheson, and you can find me pretty easy in Edmonton.
Okay, and then just give the office a call and come on in and meet you, and then you guys kind of figure out if it's a fit, and then away we go. Is that how it works?
Well, so for my clients, one of the things that we know about therapy is that people get better when they feel like they can trust their therapist, and they feel like their therapist knows what they're talking about and knows what they're doing. Feel like they have the capacity to help them. Mm-hmm. So I give my clients an opportunity, or like new clients, they can book in for like a 15-minute phone consultation just to get a sense of who I am and whether or not they think that they'll be able to work well with me. I don't want to waste my clients' money on a whole first session if it's not going to work out for them. So just to make it a little bit easier, but certainly clients can just book right in if they're comfortable and like it.
Now, but if you have benefits at work, there's definitely room on there for some psychology sessions. What about general healthcare? Is there room on there too? Like Alberta Healthcare?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I also work in the public sector as well through Alberta Health Services. And so if you don't have access to benefits and you are in need of psychological support or mental health support, there's a program through Alberta Health Services that you can contact called Access 24/7. To get a hold of them, you just call them. The number is super easy. It's 780-424-2424. And yeah, they're open. They never shut it down there. So that's another access point to counseling if that's something that you're interested or in need of,
Mm-hmm. But what about just coming to the office? What about just coming to the office? So if I've got Alberta Healthcare, there's some room on there for psychology.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So if you have benefits in order to access mental health care through Alberta Health Services, I'm able to bill directly to Alberta Health Services and Green Shield. So yeah.
Good.
Competitively processed. Yeah. Those are ways that kind of help to reduce those barriers.
And then my group benefits will have that kind of room on there as well.
Nice.
Most people, right? So that have group benefits.
Yeah, if you're fortunate enough to have benefits, right?
Yeah, so it's might as well use them. And if you're in that age group, or you're a parent of someone in that age group, you seem like a very knowledgeable and vibrant and interesting psychologist. I think you do great work.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
The other thing I just wanted to say was then that I'm able to do sessions both virtually, so just like we're having right now, and with some discernment around risk, we can have a conversation about whether in person is appropriate as well. So just to let people know that those conversations are happening to suss out the risks and benefits of when it is appropriate to see people in person as well. So just put that out there.
Tune in with Power Psychology and Associates. Find your joy again on the Health and Wellness channel on TVU with this week's guest, Clare Acheson. Thank you.
See you.